This is Empowered Human Academy. Welcome home.
It makes me feel powerful when I can think about running at full speed and bringing lots of people with me.
This is about love. This is about light. This is about the idea that you have everything you will ever need.
And this life of yours, this is where you grow, you expand, and you remember who you really are.
I'm Abe.
I'm Isaac.
In Empowered Human Academy, we join with humans of all kinds to feel the inspiration that can only come with empowered living.
The stories you hear today are unique, but the energy you hear today belongs to you too. So, with hearts wide open, let's begin.
Hello, everyone. This is another conversation through the Empowered Human Academy with Abe and Isaac. And today we have our amazing friend, Annalisa Munoz Funk. And we are so thrilled to have her. We met Annalisa a couple of years ago through mutual friends who are part of a international NGO. And we've just been really inspired by how Annalisa moves throughout her life and the choices that she makes and her career path and everything to do with life and empowerment. So we are going to start this conversation off with just giving our listeners a little bit about yourself. So if you can share about yourself, what you're about, what you're excited about, what you're passionate about, and just a little glimpse of who you are.
Yeah, well, hello. Yeah, thanks for that really kind intro. But I'm Annalisa Munoz Funk, and I live in Chicago, Illinois, and I am married to my high school sweetheart, Rusty Funk, which is a pretty badass name. I work for a brand consultancy, and so I lead some strategic projects that help bring brands to life, some of the most well-known brands, and recently transitioned into a new role to build out some other arm of our consultancy, which I'm really, really excited about. I am, a really slow runner, like really slow, an even slower triathlete. I believe in the participation medals. Even though I'm like fiercely competitive, it just doesn't translate to sports. Anyways. But I'm constantly in search of like a race to run, or whether that be a literal or proverbial race. Even though I may be the last one to cross the finish line. What else is there to know about me? I am fiercely passionate. Well, a long time ago, someone said, oh, you got to find where your passion and your skill set intersect. And I feel like as of late, I've been really lucky to understand what that is. And so really diving into gender equity work with some of my favorite, there's some fantastic organizations in Chicago that I've been working with. And so that has been a really, really cool thing as of late that I've been able to actually dedicate time and energy to.
Amazing.
Awesome. I have so many questions just based on that introduction to begin with, but have you ever seen those like one sentence novels, like an entire story in a single sentence? So for example, you said, I'm a really slow triathlete. I feel like there's an entire novel behind that. And I know that you and Abe have some similar like personality things around ambition and accomplishment. The phrase, I'm a really slow triathlete, to me feels like you have a good relationship with like effort and accomplishment and all that jazz. What does accomplishment mean to you?
Oh gosh, that accomplishment's a loaded word for a 3 on the Enneagram.
Yeah.
And I've done strength finders, and competition is number 1 for strength finders for me. So this idea of accomplishment has always been like this thread throughout my life, even though I just recently named it. But the triathlon story was kind of like this huge, it was a half Ironman distance, and it was this huge goal that I had for myself. And it was before any of my friends, my female friends, had like dove into this kind of triathlon scene, and I wanted to be the first. So there's accomplishment in that, and that like energized me. And then just the whole idea of finishing the race and pushing myself to the other side of fear, that was an accomplishment. Mm-hmm. And I finished, I'll bet much slower than I anticipated. I had a flat tire midway through and didn't realize it. So
wow.
I finished the race with a flat tire, which I got made fun of for a lot.
Wow.
But yeah, so accomplishment means a whole lot of things. Like I said, it's been that common thread. And there's always been parts in my life where I'm either, I've had to learn like I'm pushing too hard on the throttle and like being way too laser focused. And other times where I get down on myself where I'm like, you're not trying hard enough. So it's almost this constant balance of what's the good side of accomplishment versus the shadow side.
Okay. Does that feel like a constant conversation with yourself over time, or have you learned more about that over time?
Yeah, it's gotten, as you get older, you kind of collect these data points about yourself. And so I have collected those, especially in the last, 3 to 5 years. So that has really helped kind of ease that constant question mark in my brain of like, am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? There's almost this sense of stepping into like kind of this piece, like I am an achiever. I know that about myself. And I kind of can recognize certain behaviors in myself more easily when I start shifting to that shadow side.
What are some of those indicators on both sides that are healthy and unhealthy for you in achievement?
Yeah, so healthy would be that I can sense that I'm waking up really energized and I am like excited about the task. And I don't always have to have like a to-do list. I have this mental, like just propensity to finish something. And then the shadow side is when I catch myself, I'm dreading something, but I'm forcing it to happen. So I'm like setting tons of alarms for myself to make me do it. And I tend to close up and I don't like sharing about my journey with like my husband or my friends. So that can be, I can start to feel really lonely there. And those are just some indicators that I've come to learn over the last couple of years through a lot of, painful moments.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. You use the phrase get to like push to the other side of fear. Does that apply here? Like moving from the shadow side of it to the other side, or is that something different?
I just think of it as, I think of moving on the other side of fear as sort of something different because I am constantly thinking, and maybe Abe, I'm not sure if you're this way too, but this kind of thinking about, well, anything that's worth doing, I probably am going to be scared of. And I think the most beautiful things lie on the other side of fear. And so I guess I'm always in search of that feeling because I just am naturally drawn to it. Again, another thing I've learned throughout the years.
What are you afraid of right now?
Oh, I'm afraid of my job, my new job. I'm afraid of letting all of these people down that I promised something that I potentially couldn't deliver. And I have to, but it's almost like a good fear for me to have because I do wake up energized every morning and so excited to get things done.
Totally.
And then I'm scared about entering into diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations with folks. And again, that's probably a good, healthy fear to have, given past experience, but also something good to trudge through.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We were watching the DNC thing last night, and a couple times the phrase like getting in good trouble came up. And it kind of feels like the emotional version of that, like getting into your own emotional hot water, but in like for things that you do care about, things like the gender equity thing you talked about being your intersection of passion and skill set.
So can you, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
So can you share with us just a time in your career or life where you were scared and you moved through it and you were so glad that you did?
Yeah. Well, do you want something recent or older? Or do you want me to just bring you to the most emotionally salient?
Yeah, if I can jump in. Like memory that feels closest to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say something pretty recent then, because it was the impetus for the new job. I I was terrified. I was a senior consultant and had this, beautiful title at this really great org who was like a boutique firm, and all the things you think about when you're like, when I was little, walking down Michigan Avenue, getting into the high rise, walking into the boardroom, like that was the pinnacle. And
How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days?
I'm sorry?
Like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days?
Yeah, I have a morning montage mix, and I listen to it when I travel from the moment my feet hit the floor. I hit play, and I have this whole montage taken from like movie montages, like Legally Blonde. I don't know. I love a good montage. So yes, so it is my own montage. But I had this really great. It's a, and I still work for this org, Brand Trust, but it was this great thing, and I realized that what I thought was like this parachute was, out of my last job and into like opportunity felt like a ton of bricks. And that scared me. And that was terrifying because I thought this thing that I wanted for so long, it's not what I thought it was. I'm not who I thought I was. And that was terrifying to me, to think of pivoting after I had worked so hard to get somewhere where I thought it was kind of the end all be all. And so there was a lot of fear in that. And this was right around the time, you've got COVID. So there's just this underlying stress with COVID. My org was going through some tough conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so there was a lot of fear kind of swirling around in me, like I'm not good enough, or I made this huge mistake. And so I had to sort of separate myself from that a bit and talk to my leader, and took a couple of weeks off to really think about what I wanted to do. And I wrote a job description that I would want to do, and came back and pitched it to them, and they said yes. So that's the job that I'm in now. So it was, talk about fear. That was like 3 weeks of every day being terrified of what the day was going to bring, was I going to let myself down? Was I going to let other people down? All of those things. And just talking to mentors and good friends helped kind of pull out of me what I, like I said, those data points that things that I love to do. And just because I am not fitting into this consultant box does not mean that I am not worthwhile and that I have a lot of skills to bring to this org. I just need to get a little creative on how I package it. So, yeah, so that was a month ago.
Wow, that's super fresh. I love that you took the time to regroup and figure out what version of all the things that you had in front of you was going to work for you, rather than bolting completely.
Yeah.
So what were, as a businesswoman and someone who pivoted recently in your career, what were those thoughts that were going through your head in that time off? And can you share with how you packaged yourself in your strengths, which it seems like you did?
Yeah. So I'm sorry, ask that again. Ask that question again. What was going through my mind in terms of.
Yeah. So during that time off, what did the collection of your thoughts and look like, and how can you share what you packaged your gifts as to create this new role?
Yeah. A lot of things were going through my mind that were all wrapped up in all of these different emotions and psychological drivers. But there was sort of two routes in my mind of, I hate complaining without offering a solution. And that's always just been the way that I work, and I receive feedback. So I know that about myself. But there was also this innate desire to burn things down, because that's what you do when you're angry and when you feel some sort of way, which I was feeling. And so it was sort of like these two things where my natural inclination is to solution storm. And then the other one was like, just hurt, like burn the place down, separate yourself, say, see ya, I gotta go. And decided that the space allowed me to go with my gut, which was solution storm. And the way that I packaged it was actually pretty intentional in terms of the prep for it. I did talk to a lot of my mentors who asked such beautiful, beautiful questions that got to more of the emotional meaning of how I was feeling, and also helped me reflect on these glimpses of excellence, like when I've seen myself thrive and I've felt just energized. And so they really helped me kind of talk through what all of that was. And then somebody asked me, well, if you could, write your own job description, what would it be? And would you want to start your own company, or would you want to work for this org? And it was a question I kind of hadn't considered. And I said, well, honestly, I still love this org. While I do want to start my own company one day, I do really love the people here. So that helped me kind of then focus where I wanted to package and make that decision. And then I listened to a lot of podcasts. There was one in particular that helped, which was with Liz Gilbert. And she talked about like listening to your soul. Yeah. And writing yourself letters from fear and writing yourself letters from enchantment. And so I did that, and it was a beautiful practice. So I'd highly recommend it. And honestly, that really helped me think about like, okay, this is my fear talking about being scared to pitch something and feeling like entitled, that like I'm asking for the moon. But then the other side of enchantment was telling me I had to do it. And so just wrote down all of the things that I could fix at the org, and then how that tied into their long-term strategy, and built out a deck, and they said yes.
Awesome. That's
wow.
Super cool. Yeah. I asked you, okay, I'm glad you gave me an opposite word to fear, because earlier I asked you, what are you afraid of? Now, what are you enchanted by? Is that the right way to use this? Or what is enchanted?
Enchanted. Yeah, fear and enchantment. Oh gosh, there's all sorts of things that I'm enchanted with. You mean just at the moment?
Sure. You spoke to me about that side and how your like motivation and works with that. And now I want to see this side of it as well. Like what are you like? What do you light up at when you look out into the world and see certain things or opportunities?
Yeah. Right now, I see this beautiful inflection point for us as a country, and then even just in my community that I'm in, where we're talking about things that were sort of off the table before, which is gender like equity and race equity, and I get enchanted by the idea of becoming better, like collectively. And I've been able to see kind of micro versions of that play out in my friend group, in my organization, me working on sort of this introspection of considering my role in everything. And so it's a weird topic to be enchanted by, but I have been like on the edge of my seat thinking like, it finally feels real in some sense. And so that's a beautiful feeling to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Can you give me some examples of collectively becoming better? Like, what is that? I want to hear some examples because you mentioned a couple different groups where that's happening, and even in yourself. What's one example of that?
Yeah, I think, I'll just use an example from my friend. Well, I'll start with my friend group. Having just these beautiful conversations with people who are asking questions of themselves and wrestling with things. One of my good friends, who's a white woman, kind of just told me how, she was obviously felt very blind about certain things that she was partaking in and that a lot of us partake in that. And to walk with her through that was really interesting, and it felt real. It didn't feel like the performative social media version of it. So that was kind of like on a micro level. And then like when I think of that, organizations are in a sense being forced to think about diversity and equity policies in a way that like there is some accountability from public opinion now. And, I'm hoping that that lasts a while, but I just feel like there's these slow like roots being put down. Someone talked to me about, I think it was on a roundtable that I was on recently or listened to. They talked about, seeds get planted in the ground, whether you like it or not, when they think about like cultures in general, like organizational culture. And it's like, it's okay to kind of pull up those roots and reseed. And I feel like we're in this season of reseeding. And it could be really painful for some and emotional, but I do think it's beautiful.
Totally. Does your new role have anything to do with that?
It does. Yes. So I get to lead all of our DEI efforts from a internal perspective, and then consider what is our impact to the larger conversation. We are considered like thought leaders in behavioral science. And so just getting to actually put some research behind it and think about, I guess, just offer thought leadership in the space eventually. We are not there yet. We do not have a right to play yet. We have a lot to learn, but being able to really be given resources to do that is pretty great.
How do you continue your education around D&I and DEI and continue to stay healthy yourself, because it is such a heavy and complex thing that we are dismantling and going to rebuild one day? How do you stay healthy in it all?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I don't know if there's a perfect answer to that, meaning I don't know if I'll always be able to provide self-care in the way that I probably should. But I think that for me, it's been really helpful to have friends who have similar stories. Like there's some like understanding there where, it's just really nice to be able to have a community of people who are from different backgrounds, who can kind of understand some of the things that you say without even having to say it. So there's some comfort in that. And I've been pretty intentional. And I was joking with my husband that I've never been in such high demand for like one-on-ones in my life. Because I think, my good friend Tony was just telling me, like, I was on this island of suffering by myself, but I didn't know all these other people were on islands suffering too. And so she reached out, and I thought that, we were starting to build like sandbars to each other. Like, there's got to be this way to connect, us.
Great. And that's why I started the Empowered Human Academy, because we're in such an inflection point in our society where people are saying like, oh, you're experiencing that too? Oh, I can actually do this. Like there's just so much there's so many things that are coming to the surface that were taboo to talk about, or whether it be emotions or diversity or all these different types of things that happen in the human experience that we're actually creating space to explore now and develop language around, and even like mess up along the way in the learning, in the execution. But that's why I'm starting this conversation series and this course, is because I think it's so important to normalize all the different parts of the human experience, because then that leads to empowerment to like actually find what works well for you, the individual, to be your best self. So thank you for that. So in this work, in your life, what are you, there's been a lot of times where I've heard people say like, Annalisa, she's such a badass. Like, I want to like, everyone like loves Annalisa. Cause like what I appreciate about you is your playful nature, and also like your drive and your determination to be excellent at everything you do. And I try to do the same myself. So I resonate with that because I'm like super playful and super whatever. Like we dress up and go to hotel bars, and also like making an impact in the workspace, because I feel like for the longest time it's been, you have to be professional or cookie cutter to like make an impact in the business world. But people outside of that realm like didn't really have a chance to be invited into the room. So we talked a little bit about the difference between what did you say? Mentorship and access? Sponsorship and mentorship. So can you share a little bit about your thoughts on that, on how that's played out in your life?
Yeah. It was interesting. I first heard about it when I was at some leadership conference. And it, when you were younger, there's a lot of, you enter into a lot of conversations with timidity, is that right? Like scared to ask for help, scared to ask for mentors. A lot of that is representation, right? If you don't see yourself in the people that are above you, then it makes you feel as though you may not be able to get there. So you tend to build some walls there. But so this idea of mentorship and sponsorship is, you sort of need both. And so sponsorship is someone who will literally sponsor you, who's, 4 or 5 steps up ahead of their career and who will be able to kind of look back, say, I've been here, and be willing to put their name and attach it to yours. So, inviting you to that meeting, so often, even if you get into the meeting, there is this exclusionary inclusion, which means you're supposed to sit at the table, but you're not supposed to talk. So the sponsor will point to you and say, Annalisa, what are your thoughts? And so I've had the opportunity to have a sponsor at Southwest, and then this mentor who's at my current company, who was someone who was able to help me actually develop. And that was kind of like a longer term relationship, where that is where you bounce your fears, ideas, questions, all of the things to, and it is that longer term relationship. And it's not as formal as everybody thinks. I think things naturally happen. You'll find mentors, you have to obviously be open to the idea of folks who will have more experience than you and be willing to say that you don't know it all. But some people think that like mentorship and sponsorship is writing an email saying, will you be my mentor? And it's not that. It doesn't have to feel like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So you're saying it's maybe more organic than that? Like, how did you come by your current mentors, I think plural, right?
And sponsor at Southwest.
Yeah. So the sponsor at Southwest, it was me asking for time on the calendar to talk about like my goals and whatnot. And in conversation with him, he talked about this meeting that was coming up. And I did try, and I never came out and asked to be invited to the meeting, but I kept telling him ideas that he should talk about at the meeting. And he said, well, why don't you just come? And from that point on, he invited me to things that I had no right to be at, just from title alone. Yeah. It wasn't this, will you sponsor me conversation, but, he obviously just took interest in when I shared my career and what my aspirations were. I think he saw a little bit of himself when he was younger in that. And he is still a very good friend. Him and his wife were kind of like parents to me when I was out in Texas, but it happened a little bit more organically for both. Although I will say for mentors, I have asked folks, hey, can I get coffee with you? I'd love to take a little time just to learn about your story, learn about how you got here, and be kind of open-handed with that's my ask versus kind of like a bait and switch type of thing. So it's organic, meaning, not everyone uses the words mentor and sponsor. But I think of it as like these connections that there is hopefully a value add on both sides.
So for those of you listening, Annalisa spent many years at Southwest and was pretty high up in the organization. And I'm just curious, as a woman and as a woman of color, what was your experience like climbing the corporate ladder as a woman of color?
It was, I'll say overall, in the moment, I didn't always think about things. And then upon reflecting on them, I'm like, oh, that's what that was. So, early on, there was a lot of, and it was also a blue collar industry, aviation is. So that in itself is just a little different. But even in the corporate, when I moved to the corporate side of things, microaggressions and things like that still existed. There was a lot of proverbial head patting, sweetie, honey, asking me to get things that were not part of my job description, like coffee and whatnot. Then I think when I was a 21-year-old, that's when I first started working at Southwest. I didn't know to push back on. And honestly, I didn't think about it until Southwest sent me to this leadership conference called Power, Opening Doors for Women. And, I heard all these women talking about their experiences. And I was like, wait a minute, I feel that all the time. And so through that community, I was able to kind of get some tools and like tips, I should say, of like when someone tries to take credit for your idea, how do you handle that? When someone cuts you off, how can you nicely say, let me just finish my thought because I really want to think about what I really want to focus on what you're going to say. Because there is this tendency to be talked over, for people to take credit, for people to judge you based off of what you've accomplished, not what you could accomplish, which I think is a huge difference between how men and women are viewed. So at Southwest, there was definitely, and I think honestly, I feel like it happens at every org, and that women are potentially judged on their personality traits and their interpersonal skills versus actual accomplishment. And that was a conversation that I had with, I gave some pretty hard feedback to a leader who was 2 steps ahead of me after I went to this conference, and asked him to take a look at his performance reviews and to circle all of the emotional words that he put in, and then to compare how many emotional words he put in for the women and how many emotional words he put in for the men. And he came back and he apologized to me.
Oh, wow.
Said, you're so right. I need to rethink and think about my biases. So yeah, but had I not gone to that conference, I wouldn't have been told, to think about those things and to push back. And I think that comes with just experience too, and feeling confident enough to stand your ground a bit and take up space. Because as a 21-year-old, I certainly didn't know what or how to do that.
Wow.
This is super interesting. So there were tools to work with, but also tools for recognizing what your experience actually is, through the finding language for other people. Is that right?
Yeah. It was sort of just hearing. I heard someone published a book called. It was her PhD dissertation it's called Breaking Through Bitch, and it was this body of research that did talk about the discrepancy in performance appraisal. So it wasn't even it was more just hearing, right? It's this whole awareness, right? Understanding oh, this is happening, and then taking that, internalizing it, reflecting, and then internalizing that and saying oh, that's happened to me too. I'm sure I remember my last performance appraisal, and it all talked about how I'm a good partner to people and didn't say once about how I've led 5 projects and brought them to cascaded them across the org, but I'm a good partner. So just having that awareness and community that people shared their experiences was super helpful to me. Just to learn, Abe, like what you said, just learning from each other. There's so much to learn in the human story. And so I've just gotten the pleasure of being able to listen to a lot of stories.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'd love and want to see like a standardization for like receiving a performance review and then pushing it back saying, yes, but my review of your performance review. That seems like it could be a really, have you done that? Have you done that more than once?
Have I done what?
Like that's, well, like
have you given the feedback
Yeah,
about your performance more than once?
like that sort of thing. Yeah.
No, it's so funny because that was my one and only male boss, and then the other ones were all female, and I never had that problem. I never had anyone talking about my emotion in a performance review. I've done a lot of 360 reviews, so lots of people. I love those because that feels more real and some less room for biases. But that was my only time that I, had the challenge of it.
Well, that's a fantastic answer, and I'm delighted to hear that.
Representation matters. That's why it matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask. So you mentioned one of your mentors is a use the gender pronoun him. What is it like having a mentorship relationship with people who don't share, like with people with whom there are important, like with regard to the diversity, equity, inclusion initiative, when you're sitting on different sides of that conversation in a mentorship mentee situation? What is that like?
Yeah, honestly, I have found it helpful to have someone who's walked, it's both, right? Like you want folks that you can have that immediate understanding because you've walked similar paths. But I mean, truthfully, no one's path is ever that like exactly similar. But there was this sense of, and I think I was joking about it with one of my friends of like, hey, I need a white male, generationally wealthy man as my mentor, because guess what? Those are the people that are making these big decisions. Like I need to understand how said person thinks and learn tips and tricks. And that's what I know that I'm getting. And I say all of that in jest because he's one of our best friends. But it's like, I know that that's kind of the role that I need for certain conversations to understand. And then there's, my other friends who can offer me a lot of other things. And so it's been, I think I went into it being very highly aware of that, which I think is just interesting because I feel like people are just getting aware of it. And maybe, Abe, you and I talked about one time you mentioned, oh yeah, I was in my new building and I was the only one of color. And I remember being like, oh, he knows, like you're always hyper aware of the difference, And so I think that even in those, when I was 21, because I did meet this, this gentleman when I was 21 and I knew then, oh, this is what I'm going to get from him is the white male, generationally wealthy perspective.
And I feel like as Enneagram 3s, which we're going to have a conversation with an Enneagram coach, or we might have by now. Depends on where we put this in the series. But as 3s, we're aware of opportunities for us to succeed. So for me, as a Hispanic person, gay, in the closet, I always looked for opportunities to situate myself in experiences or in front of people who like would get me to a place that I had no access to because I just didn't have access to it because of my race or my sexuality. And it's something that has made us more aware of opportunities, more strategic. And part of me in the past have been like, well, does that make me not genuine? But I've been able to bring my genuine spirit and who I am to those people who mentorship and sponsorship. So sponsors, right? Because the sponsors are often people with more privilege than you or different opportunities than you. So I think that's why you say that because I resonate with that so much. Yeah.
And one last thing is, and truthfully, like the reality of today, or even when I was in those conversations of, identifying sponsors and mentors, like that is all that was there. Can you think of from a representation standpoint? So like, I went into it with my eyes open, knowing that just what you said, like getting that access, but there also was not this beautiful library of people who who looked like me, or to select from. Though I do find a lot of value in the differences, particularly in the mentorship area.
Totally. And I just have a couple more questions to end this conversation off. Do you find yourself excited to now sponsor people along their journey, or have you seen yourself more inclined to do that?
Yes. Oh, I get giddy when anybody asks for like a coffee chat or whatnot, and I probably get like too excited. I come with like a list of questions about dreams, aspirations, all of like the Enneagram questions and whatnot. Because I remember how open-handed and kind people were with me. Mm-hmm. And so if I can be half as wonderful as the folks in my life, I get really excited to think about it. And I'm like, okay, who's gonna replace me in my role? Who's gonna, the people are gonna obviously outlast me. What's this next generation that's coming up? And so I get really excited about like looking for a successor to, just even from a job perspective. But I've just had the pleasure of, LinkedIn is a beautiful place. Oftentimes I get so many messages from college, like fresh college grads. And it's been so fun to keep in touch with them and have conversations. Like that is so life-giving.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So the Empowered Human Academy is here to equip people to live their best life. And this is a way to help show the kind of humanity in all of us, no matter your race, gender, position, generational wealth. I think what's really beautiful about being human is that we all have unlimited capacity to achieve and do whatever we want. And connecting that, what does an empowered Annalisa look like and feel like?
She looks like she is galloping at full speed, and she's got her arms out, and she's taking lots of people with her.
I love that. And how does that make you feel?
Oh, I mean, powerful, right? I think and maybe it's a 3, like you're constantly in this search of feeling powerful, as though you whether it's worthy, whether it's value, like you're a value add, but I just think of power. So it makes you feel, it makes me feel powerful when I can think about running at full speed and bringing lots of people with me.
Love that. And the final question that we've ended these conversations off with is, what is one thing you know for sure?
One thing I know for sure. Oh my goodness. About me or about life in general?
You can take it however you want to.
I think that one thing I know for sure is that we collectively, me as a human, are in this perpetual state of becoming. And it is a beautiful and painful and life-giving journey to be on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Annalisa.
Thank you.
We have learned a lot from you, and I hope everyone who's listening has as well. You're amazing. We're going to share some of the links to your podcast that you listened to during the conversation, during your 2 weeks off in this series. But thank you so much.
This podcast is the work of Lightward, our company, named for that toward the light direction which informs every single thing that we do, including money. Which means, like everything else, the way we earn revenue is not based on industry norms. It's based on what feels deeply right and aligned by passing through the door that feels like it has more behind it, not less. And the way we keep this podcast going is all Lightward. It's pay what feels good. It's an exchange of value between you and us. We're keeping conventional podcast advertising totally out of this. And here's how Pay What Feels Good works. We give you this episode because it feels good to do so. And you consider, honestly, what number of dollars this episode is genuinely worth to you. I do not care if that's $3, $1,000, or literally $0 and a heart emoji, as long as that trade genuinely makes your day better. And the energy there is the entire point. That is what we're building our business on. No advertisers, no selling your attention, just you and us, trading value in a way that builds us both up. So whatever the number, when you're done listening, head to empoweredhumanacademy.com and hit the Pay What Feels Good button. We use this policy across all of our company's work, and I'm really excited to bring it here to the world of podcasts. This is us voting for the world we want to see. Thank you for being here.